The high school cafeteria buzzed with the usual chaos, students laughing, gossiping, and rushing to claim seats before the best spots were taken. The scent of greasy pizza and overcooked fries filled the air, blending with the faint hum of chattering voices. In the far corner, away from the noise, Maya sat alone at a small table, flipping through the worn pages of a book. Unlike the others, she wasn't distracted by the cafeteria's energy. Her focus remained steady, her dark brown eyes scanning the words as if nothing else in the world mattered. But someone had noticed her. Jake Reynolds, the school's golden boy, tall, broad-shouldered, and arrogant, strolled through the cafeteria with his usual cocky stride, his Letterman jacket draped over his shoulders, his blonde hair perfectly styled. He was used to having all eyes on him, whether on the football field or in the hallways, and he thrived on it. His group of friends trailed behind him, snickering as he scanned the room for entertainment. That's when his gaze landed on Maya. A small smirk curled on his lips. "Well, well, look who we have here," he muttered, making his way toward her table. Maya didn't react. She turned a page in her book, her expression unreadable. Jake's smirk widened. He didn't like being ignored. With a swift motion, he swiped his hand across the table, smacking her book onto the floor. The loud thud echoed through the cafeteria, making several heads turn. Gasps rippled through the students, and silence followed. Maya didn't move. She simply stared at Jake, her face calm, her expression unwavering. No, Jake let out a fake laugh, shaking his head. "What's a girl like you doing in my cafeteria?" His friends chuckled behind him, their voices mixing with the tension in the air. Maya remained still, her deep brown eyes locked onto his, but there was no fear, only an unsettling, quiet confidence. Jake expected her to flinch, to look away, to act weak, but she didn't. The cafeteria held its breath. No one dared to step in. They had seen what happened to those who got in Jake's way. But what they didn't know, what Jake didn't know, was that today would be different. The tension in the cafeteria grew thick, like a storm brewing just before the first crack of thunder. Students whispered among themselves, watching the scene unfold with a mix of curiosity and unease. Jake wasn't done. Maya remained seated, her gaze unwavering, her calm demeanor almost unsettling. That only fueled Jake's irritation. He thrived on fear, on submission, but Maya wasn't giving him either. With a scoff, he reached down, grabbing her backpack from the floor. Without hesitation, he yanked it up and dumped everything inside onto the cafeteria tiles. Notebooks, pens, a water bottle, all scattered at her feet. The room erupted into laughter. Some students whispered in amusement, others chuckled nervously, but no one stopped him. Maya slowly leaned forward, her hands resting on the table. Still, she said nothing. Jake spread his arms out, grinning. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" His friends laughed on cue, feeding off his arrogance. Then, without warning, he shoved her shoulder, just enough to force a reaction. But Maya didn't stumble. She stepped back, calm, firm, and still unshaken. Jake blinked. He had expected her to flinch, to recoil, maybe even beg him to stop. Instead, she straightened her posture, meeting his gaze head-on. And then, finally, she spoke. "You're gonna regret this." Her voice was soft, almost too quiet for the crowd to hear, but the confidence behind it sent a chill through the air. Jake let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Regret?" He took a step closer. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but..." His mistake. He reached out, grabbing her wrist aggressively. A collective gasp swept through the cafeteria. Students froze, their laughter dying instantly. The air shifted, heavy with anticipation. Maya's expression didn't change. Jake tightened his grip. "What are you gonna do about it?" He sneered, expecting her to finally show fear. Instead, she smirked. And in that second, everything changed. For a moment, the cafeteria seemed frozen in time. All eyes locked on Maya and Jake. His grip tightened around her wrist, expecting resistance, expecting fear. But what he wasn't expecting was her next move. Maya's expression shifted, the quiet calm replaced with an ice-cold focus. Her posture changed ever so slightly, her muscles coiling like a spring ready to snap. Then, she moved. In one smooth, precise motion, she twisted her arm, breaking free from his grip effortlessly. The sudden movement caught Jake off guard, his fingers slipping away before he even registered what had happened. Before he could react, boom! Maya struck, a lightning-fast, devastating elbow to his ribs. Jake stumbled back, a choked gasp escaping his lips, as pain exploded through his side. His friends' laughter died in their throats, their smug faces twisting into shock. The entire cafeteria erupted. Some students cheered, others sat frozen, wide-eyed in disbelief. Jake's face twisted with anger and embarrassment. No one had ever done this to him. With a furious growl, he lunged forward, swinging wildly. Maya dodged, a swift step to the side, his fist sliced through empty air. Before he could recover, she countered, a sharp leg sweep, clean, effortless. Jake's feet left the ground. He crashed into the cafeteria floor with a thud. A collective gasp rippled through the students. No one could believe what they had just seen. Jake, the untouchable, the bully, the king of the school, was on his back. And Maya? She stood over him, calm, composed, and completely in control. Jake coughed, pushing himself up, his face burning with humiliation. But his hands shook. For the first time, he looked nervous. And so did his friends. The tables had turned, and everyone in the room knew it. The cafeteria air was thick with tension. Jake lay on the floor for a second, stunned, his mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. He had ruled the school for years. No one had ever dared to stand up to him. But now, Maya stood over him, calm, unshaken, completely in control. The murmurs in the crowd were growing louder. People were talking. Jake's face burned with humiliation. He pushed himself up, shaking with fury. "You're gonna pay for this," he snarled. His voice dripped with venom, but deep inside he felt something he never had before, fear. But he wouldn't let it show. He turned sharply, gesturing to his friends. "Get her." In an instant, 3 of Jake's friends, Chad, Ryan, and Mike, stepped forward, forming a tight circle around Maya. The cafeteria gasped. This was bad, really bad. But Maya still didn't flinch. She simply exhaled, scanning them like a hawk sizing up its prey. Ryan cracked his knuckles. Chad smirked. Mike rolled his shoulders. Jake, breathing hard, sneered. "Let's see how tough you are now." The circle tightened. And then, "Back off," a deep, commanding voice boomed through the cafeteria. Everyone froze. Heads snapped toward the source. A tall, muscular man stepped forward. Coach Davis, the school's MMA instructor. Silence fell over the cafeteria like a heavy blanket. Coach Davis strode forward, eyes locked on Jake, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. "I see someone finally taught you a lesson, Jake." Jake stiffened, his face losing its color. "Maya?" She allowed herself the slightest smirk. Coach Davis turned to her and nodded approvingly. "Good technique, clean execution." A ripple of shock went through the students. "Wait, what? No way," someone whispered. "Maya fights?" Jake's jaw clenched. This freak is one of your students?" Coach Davis crossed his arms. "Not just any student, Jake." He let the words sink in, then with absolute certainty he said, "One of my best." Jake's fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. Humiliation burned through his chest like fire. The entire cafeteria was still staring at him, but their faces had changed. They weren't afraid of him anymore. They were laughing, cheering. For her, Maya stood tall, calm, unshaken, like she had never even broken a sweat. Coach Davis shook his head. "Pick on someone your own size, Jake." His voice was low, firm, a warning. Jake's jaw tightened, his breathing heavy. He wanted to lash out, wanted to prove he wasn't weak, but deep inside he knew if he tried anything now, he'd lose again. And worse, it would be in front of everyone. Maya had humiliated him, and now his own classmates were turning against him. Maya! 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 The chant started with one student, then two, then an entire section of the cafeteria was shouting her name. Jake felt sick. Just days ago, people feared him. Now they were celebrating his defeat. Then, the worst thing possible happened. The school admin arrived. A tall woman in a sharp blazer stormed through the crowd. Principal Carter. The moment her icy gaze landed on the scene, Jake knew he was in trouble. "What is going on here?" she demanded. Jake saw his one chance. He put on his best innocent face. Ma'am, she attacked me," he stammered. "I was just trying to talk to her, and she went crazy." A few students snorted. Some even rolled their eyes. But Jake wasn't done. "She knocked me down for no reason. You gotta believe me." Principal Carter crossed her arms, unimpressed. "Is that so?" Then, one by one, students started raising their phones. Jake's stomach dropped. Multiple students had recorded everything. The video evidence showed it all. Jake knocking her book down, grabbing her wrist, pushing her backpack, trying to fight her. And worst of all, him losing. Principal Carter took a phone from a student, watching the footage in silence. Her face darkened. Then she turned to Jake. "My office. Now." Jake froze. But she... Now. Whispers ran through the crowd. Jake felt the walls closing in. Till the final blow came when Principal Carter added, "You're suspended until further notice." The cafeteria erupted. Jake had lost, completely. And his reputation? Destroyed. The cafeteria was buzzing. Whispers, gasps, murmurs of shock. Eyes followed Maya's every move. But she was as calm as ever. Without a word, she bent down and picked up her book, the same book Jake had knocked out of her hands. She dusted it off, flipping to her last page like nothing had happened. The crowd parted as she stood up. Jake still stood there, frozen, defeated, his face pale, his reputation in ruins. He turned to his friends, Chad, Ryan, Mike, his so-called crew, but they weren't looking at him. They were looking at Maya. Ryan shook his head. "Dude, she destroyed you." Mike backed away. "You deserved it, man." Even Chad, the most loyal of them all, didn't say a word. He just stepped away. Jake's hands shook. He had spent years controlling this school. But now, he was nothing. Maya glanced at Coach Davis, who had been watching with pride. He gave her a small nod. "Proud of you, kid." Maya simply smirked. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. The students parted, making a path for her. Whispers followed her. "I had no idea she could fight like that. She took down Jake like it was nothing. She's a total badass." Maya? She didn't need to say a thing. She just walked out, head high, completely unfazed. And in that moment, everyone knew. The days of Jake ruling this school were over. 1 week later, Jake walked through the hallways with his head down. A month ago, these halls had been his kingdom. Students moved aside when he walked. His name commanded fear. Now, he was invisible. Whispers followed him, but not the kind he was used to. "That's Jake, the guy Maya wrecked. Man, I still can't believe it. She took him down in seconds." Jake clenched his jaw, his fist tightening, but he did nothing. Because now, everyone knew what he really was. A coward. A locker slammed nearby, making Jake flinch. He hated this. Hated how his body reacted now, instinctively checking his surroundings. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't the one people feared. He was the one afraid. Across the hallway, Maya stood by her locker, casually flipping through a book. Students greeted her with nods, small smiles, respect. The same people who used to ignore her now saw her differently. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not because she fought, but because she stood her ground. Because she refused to be a victim. Then, a sudden noise. A new bully, Tyler, a senior, was shoving a younger kid against the lockers. "Where's my money, huh?" Tyler sneered. "I told you I don't like waiting." The hallway froze. But before anyone could react, Tyler's eyes flicked up, landing on Maya. She wasn't even looking at him. She simply turned a page in her book. But something about her presence, the way she stood, the memory of what she had done to Jake, made him pause. His grip on the kid loosened, his shoulders tensed, and then he backed off. Without another word, he stepped away, stuffing his hands in his pockets like nothing happened. Maya smirked just slightly. Then she closed her book, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and walked away. The hallway watched in silence. And somewhere someone murmured, "Some lessons are learned the hard way." The hallway watched in silence. And somewhere someone murmured, "Some lessons are learned the hard way."